Thank you all so much for having me. Again, as the screen says, my name is David Michael Morgan. Some of you may be confused by the last name. I am Korean. I was actually born in Seoul. My birth mother tried to raise me, but ultimately it was too much for her to handle. So she made the tough decision to give me to an orphanage. I'm thankful for that decision every day because that allowed me to be ultimately here today talking to you all. Then, at the ripe age of 6 months old, I won the lottery. I was adopted to the United States of America by my loving parents, Preston and Jane Morgan. I was raised in Tennessee in the small town of Rockwood with a population of 6,000 people. During the 2010 census, there were 16 Asians in Rockwood. My family, along with my 3 younger siblings who were all adopted, accounted for a quarter of that. So we're talking about a place where there's over 90% white and only 0.27% Asian. When people hear about where I grew up, they often ask if I was made fun of or picked on as a child. And the truth is that I really wasn't. A lot of that had to do with the protection of my parents and the goodwill of being a Morgan. I remember the day I found out that I was adopted. I was in preschool where I met my first non-white kids. I remember seeing their parents pick them up and how they matched. And I was confused because my parents didn't look like me. So being inquisitive, I asked them why we didn't look alike. So when we got home, they sat me down at the dining room table with my adoption paperwork and carefully explained everything. I don't quite remember what my initial response was, but at the end of it, they explained that no matter our differences, they were my mom and dad, and they loved me unconditionally. I was raised in a loving Christian home. I grew up going to Sunday school and youth group every week. During the summers, when I was in elementary school, I would stay with my grandparents. My grandmother used to make cassette tapes of me memorizing the books of the Bible. She also gave each of her grandchildren a verse of the Bible for us to memorize. Mine was John 3:16, and of course the only version that she believed in, the King James Version. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Then, when I was around 12, I asked Jesus Christ to be my Lord and Savior, and I knew that I was a sinner who was condemned to hell, and that the only way into heaven was to accept him and his sacrifice. Then, for the next 10 years, I worked hard. I had a lot of success. My high school baseball team went to the state championships twice. I ended up graduating valedictorian of my high school, which was only 100 people. And I received a scholarship to the University of Tennessee. All that success led to one of the worst things possible for a Christian: pride. Then what happens to most teenagers that grow up in a sheltered hometown and leave? I rebelled. I worked all throughout college, which was my excuse for not going to church. I withdrew from my family and from God. Success became my idol. I got an internship for Gatorade at their headquarters in Chicago. I won every election in my business fraternity, including president my senior year. I secured a great job with Frito-Lay in Dallas. My ego and pride were at their all-time high, which means I was also the most disconnected from God. And as the old saying goes, pride goeth before the fall. Until this point, if I worked hard enough at something, it would eventually work out in my favor. Then 2 years after college, everything came crumbling down. I hated my new job. My relationship of 2 years with a non-Christian came to an end. I was at rock bottom because all of my self-worth and happiness was invested in being successful. I remember feeling so alone and angry, trying to understand why this was happening to me. For months, I continued on a downward spiral, looking for happiness and fulfillment in all the wrong places. Then God stepped in. At an unlikely place, at a friend's Super Bowl party, someone asked me about being a Christian. I explained to them that I'd been a Christian my entire life. But as they asked me more questions, I began to realize that I wasn't living a Christian life at all. Soon afterwards, I started checking out different churches and eventually found one that I liked and started attending regularly. Then, one of my friend's mothers told me about a men's Bible study fellowship group that I should check out. It was comprised of guys from all walks of life and all denominations of Christianity. And the biggest takeaway from my time there were 2 very simple instructions: to give thanks and praise. Focusing daily to do those 2 simple things truly changed my life. It humbled me to trust and thank God in all circumstances, both good and bad. That led me to one of my closest friends that helped me start my current career doing something that I love. That career brought me here to California, which is where I met my soon-to-be wife, Patricia. She introduced me to CCSC, where I've met so many incredible people who inspire me through their humility and servant leadership. Those examples have taught me a deeper understanding of God's grace and how it's truly a gift that we receive based on no merit of our own. That understanding allows me to reflect on God's blessings throughout my life. My parents chose me and gave me their love and protection, even though I did absolutely nothing to deserve it. And as amazing as that grace they showed me by adopting me into their family is, it pales in comparison to the gift of God's grace and how he adopts us into his family, which is the ultimate reason to give thanks and praise.